So I'm gonna move right along and say, okay, now we kind of saw a little bit how to play around with pandas. So let's start manipulating data. Let's start moving data around and kind of get a feel for it. So I'm gonna go ahead and go into a new, this new notebook, but I'm gonna load up this new data set that's also from sklearn called diabetes. And so this is a little interesting because you'll see all the values here are less than 0. So like going off of Jessica's suggestion, you can see dot round. You can see here sometimes it might not be the best because it might, like this might be rounding off too much. So it's always a good thing just to look at your data to originally, and just that's why you just df.head, and you can see it's all numerics. We can see age, sex, BMI, BP, probably blood pressure, right? We could probably look this up where the data comes from. S1, S2, S3, S4, S5, S6. I don't know what those are. Anything weird when we first look at this that someone wants to know?
Some of them are negative.
Yeah, some are negative, right? Like one particular age, right? Yeah, you can't have negative age, right? That doesn't make any sense. Maybe, like, okay. Anything else that we see that's kind of weird, kind of strange?
The sex is not binary.
Yeah, you look at that sex, you're like, wait a second. What does it mean by sex 0.50680? Like, we can come up with all these weird things, right? You're like, but like what's going on here? So this is like some of the stuff like, okay, like this is when you get in a data set, you want to explore this and kind of understand a little bit like what's going on here. And that's why a df.head is always really useful to kind of just give you an initial part. So any suggestions what we would do next? Like check out this data set.
.describe.
Hey, why not .describe, right? So df.describe. Oops. And you can see here, I was like, okay, so we're starting to see some stuff. So first of all, we can see the count, right? So we can see this is going to be 442 points, right? And we can see there's a mean for the age, which is weird, right? But you can see quick like standard deviation, the minimum. So we actually have negative parts, we have a maximum. So you can see here that the minimum and maximum don't actually go very high. And this is where, as you get used to stuff, you might say, oh, this is probably because it's scaled down to some number. So maybe it's like divided by over some value or something like that. The sex part is probably the interesting one. You can see here is that basically like the 25, the minimum is this number, the maximum is this number, but you can see 75% and 50% here. This is like a little strange, like, well, what's going on here? Anyone got to guess like what, like why are we seeing 25% of them being negative 0.446? Like why are we seeing this? I'm gonna guesses. There's no wrong answers here. We're just kind of making guesses here.
Maybe people didn't answer if it was like a survey, people didn't answer it.
Maybe someone didn't answer it correctly, right? It seems oddly strange, right? Like I think Johnny earlier said, I heard someone say like binary. I think that was Johnny. Something it's like, it's not binary, right? And Johnny, could you tell me like when you said it's not binary, what does that mean exactly?
Like there's no indication if it's either like male or female, but I do see like positive and negative. Maybe that could be a thing possibly.
Yeah, maybe there's something going on there, right? So this is where like, okay, this sex part, like we definitely would think like at least, you know, from like most, you know, data sets, it might just be male, female. They might have other third classification as well, depending, you know, what you're talking about for sex or something like that. But the point is like, okay, there usually would be something like categories, right? Mostly binary, but maybe some other things, right? So what we can do here is like, let's look at that specific column, df.sex, right? No, I use .sex here because it's just one word. I could have also done this. This is the same thing, this is more generic, but if it doesn't interfere with anything, I can just do .sex here, but I'll just keep it like this since we're used to seeing that. So if we do this, you can see here, okay, like this is not, like, again, this is not super useful because like, oh my gosh, like there's so many different values. There's 440, there's a whole bunch missing here. I'm thinking like, I just want to see what the different values are. So what we can do is .unique, right? And you can see here, hey, look, there's only 2 unique values, which makes a little more sense for this data set. Like, okay, like they're basically codifying probably male, female, right? As 2 different values. And like Johnny said, one's positive, one's negative, it just happens to be this one. So that's something, it's like, okay, these are just kind of things like how you explore things. Like there isn't like a wrong, like I will say is that the data itself, the data aren't wrong. Even if it's in like not representative of the world, the data are data. never is anything different. The point is for you to decide like, why is it this way? And like, does it make sense? So you can see here's like, okay, this sex, for example, needs to be binary. Or like, we need to treat it as like, either 0 or 1 or something like that, or, male, female, or whatever the classifications are. Okay, so you can kind of quickly observe some stuff. So that's like really basic, like brief kind of just going through like, all right, that's how you kind of notice these patterns and kind of have your questions, like you have your questions and you explore it and then you try to answer those questions and like, well, what exactly is this? Okay, and kind of understand how the overall field I'm trying to pull here. Okay, so cool. So let's go on to this part. I just mentioned about lambda functions. So I'll just put it here again, is that I just talked about how these are basically the same exact function. So if I actually put in, let's see if I do it this right. You can see here that they're both functions. So just know they're not a big difference. I can also give it a name. So just like CC double me, I can actually call that function double me, and I can use it just like a regular function, just like if I did double. I do the same exact thing. Okay, so I won't go into full detail about this, but I think you guys know generally functions. Okay, so let's go back to our data set. So it's like, okay, let's check out age, right? So the age was a weird one too, right? Because it was definitely like not the age we would typically find. So I do df age, so doing just the age column. I do a dot head just to kind of check this out. As we saw, like it's kind of weird. It's not really what I expect for age, right, off the top of my head. And you can see I can also check out the type. For example, if I do type, you can see it is in fact a series. And that's just me showing you guys that it is in fact like a series, not a data frame. So like, okay, like, well, these values are kind of hard to see. Let's go ahead and just like multiply them all by, in this case, like 1,000. Yeah, that seems about right, right? So 1,000, so that way they're just not decimal numbers and stuff like that. And so I can actually apply this function, lambda x, and this is the input right here. So it's going to go on each part of the df age, so on the series, it's going to take in that value and return that value times 1,000. Okay, and you can see here, that's exactly what happens. Okay, note that when I do this right here, this df.map, it has not changed. I'm just do age like this. It has not changed the actual data frame. It basically has applied this directly and then returned this. That's why I have to put my result equals. Okay, this is very common practice. This is what you call out of place changes. In data science, we typically don't want to touch the main data. We want to make copies of it so we can always reproduce it and go back to what we originally had. Note that some functions have a dot in or have an in place. Like for example, like dot drop will have like in place, and you'll see people use that in place operation. I tend to say don't use that if possible, just because it's hard to keep track of like when you made changes versus like, you can restart and just see it flow through. Okay, so I'll show that when we get closer to something. But anyway, you change the values. I could have also done something like I could apply my function I had up here, double, or put a new function right here. And I'm just showing you, like for example, I'm just doubling the age right here. I don't know what I did here. Oh, I just multiplied by 2. It doesn't look like I multiplied by 2. Oh, because I have a double age. There we go. Sorry. I added, so you can see here, I can actually add new columns as well here. So what's cool is that, even though df double h does not exist, I can actually add it as a new series on here. You can see, just add it straight over here, and you can see that's actually double age. Okay. So these are things that you can do to kind of like explore, but also kind of clean a little bit and like put in new values and stuff. Yeah. Any questions about what I've shown here? Sound pretty good? Thumbs up, thumbs down, sideways. All right, cool. Everyone's looking pretty good. All right, so some quick things that's going to give you a little like, hold on for a sec, but I'm going to go ahead and get some, what's it called? Text data. So this fetch 20s news groups, it just to show you guys what it looks like. I was going to download for a second, but this is basically going to be based around some text data. And so with this text data, it doesn't take too long, 14 megabytes, it shouldn't be too long. What I can do with this stuff is like, okay, like if I have text, I might want to do certain operations. So for example, I think this one, if I remember this right, is actually like a data frame that has like, there is some comments and stuff like this. So, or I guess this is messages. So you can see here, this text data, this is the actual data frame, is like from, this person, and it's got a whole message. So for example, if I just go ahead and pull up that very first one, let's say df.text. No, let's not just do that. Just do text. What? Oh, news.text. Okay, so you can see the very first part. For example, if I just want to get the first one, you can see here's the full text right here. And you can see, okay, like it looks like basically like a message kind of stuff. So it's like, okay, let's pretend these are like, I don't know, comments or like, let's say reviews or something like this. I want to say, okay, what I want to know is, was this, a nice review? Was it like, saying good things about stuff? And so I define it's like, well, some words that I consider good words, like, oh, awesome, love, good, great. It's like, I only want those comments, right? I only want to read those things. So I can actually define this good words here and then say, okay, DF news sentiment. So sentiment meaning like, like what was the intent? Like, how do they feel, right? So I'm going to define this guy right here. And I can now take the DF news, I'm getting the text, right? And I'm going to do this dot map. So this will map a function to each row. So it's going to take every row and it's going to feed it in. It's like, all right, the map's saying, all right, I'm going to apply whatever function you give me, and I'm going to apply it to every single row. So this guy right here is actually the full function going on here. Okay, so with this guy, it's going to take that value. What's this x going to be? What's the input to this function? Like if you take this very first, it's going to apply it to the first row. What's the input? I think I saw someone.
The words
Text.
from the text.
Yeah, it's the text, it's the words, right? It's that first row, right? It's whatever this chunk is, right? That's what's going to apply, right? So you can imagine like, okay, it's as if we fed this thing into the function. And what it's going to do is just going to return the word good if any. So note that if any, basically this part is saying, if this is true, it's going to return good. So what is it checking? It's like, well, if any word in x.lower for word in good words. So like, okay, that was a lot kind of going through. So it's saying, okay, if any, and then it's going to have a list right here. So this list right here is saying, all right, the word in x.lower. So remember, x is the text, right? So if there's a word for word in good words. So what it's doing here is saying, oh, for word in good words, it's saying, okay, for each of these words, do any of these good words appear in X, the whole text? And if any of these words are found in this text, right, in this like row, then just return the word good. Otherwise, else, just return bad. Okay. So you can see I kind of split this up a little bit to make it a little bit easier to read. Sometimes you'll see people write this as a whole long thing. Some people might argue saying, you know what, maybe you should write this as a separate function and not a lambda function, right? It all depends exactly what you're doing at the time and what makes the most sense. But the main thing here is that remember that map is just going to take in a function. We're giving that function. The first input is going to be just the text itself. And then what it's going to do is either return good or it's going to return bad. It's going to return good if any, so if this is any of those things are actually found in there. Okay, cool. So I know that's kind of a lot to take in a little bit, but I wanted to give you guys something a little complicated. So what we should see here is instead of having, because I have a sentiment here, we'll have the text on one side, we'll have sentiment on the other side, and basically in sentiment will be good, bad, good, bad, whatever, right? And we can do news.head. So let's go ahead and run this guy. You see 9 milliseconds, pretty quick. df.head, and you can see here, hey, we have bad, bad. Oh, look at good, right? So this had some word either awesome, love, good, or great, right? If I wanted to, I'm going to put this one as bad, right? So let's see a word that's here. Let's put need as one of the words. And note that I have as lowercase. So I run this guy again, and now I have a sentiment, and you can see, hey, it's now good because it has the word need in it. Okay, so this is how you can kind of build up, features within like, your data set, because all I had here was text. Okay. How's that all sound? Thumbs up, thumbs down, sideways. Yeah. Okay, cool. I see head nods. So yeah, pretty cool, huh? All right. So let's see here. Oh, this going back to our what was it? I can't remember, BMI or whatever data set, diabetes data set we had. So df.set or .head. So let's say, for example, the sex part. It's like, I want to change this into male, female. It's just easier for me to kind of very quickly look at this. So I can do that same thing, map here, taking a function. That X part is just going to be a row in sex, right? So it's going to be just these values. And I noticed that basically from unique, that this is basically greater than 1 and then less than 1, just to make it nice and easy. I'm saying female if X is less than 0, else it's male. And here I'll quickly say is that I actually don't know if negative or positive is male or female. This is assuming that like I looked at the documentation and said, oh, this is where this value came from, or I know something about the data. But I'm making this distinction to make it a little bit easier. And now if I do this now, you can see that I actually changed sex in this case. So note that sex already was defined and actually rewrote over it. So you can see male, female. Okay, pretty cool. Sound good.
So in that case, you changed the actual data, right?
That's right, yeah. So you can see here now, if I go ahead and like comment this out, df.head right here is always gonna be changed. So this is why like it's tends to be better practice, if you can, is to keep this original part here. What you might do is something like make a new like copy. So you might do like df copy equals df, and then go ahead and then change the df copy versus the df itself. And that way you can always keep this separate and like make sure you can always go back to it and refer. Okay, of course you can like always rerun the whole thing, but as you saw in some cases, like this guy right here, when I was trying to load this data frame, that took a long time. So imagine I've had to rerun that every single time just to see if I was, you know, made a mistake or something like that. That can be a huge pain. So that's why typically we keep df or the original data set untouched. Cool. All right, good pointing that out.